All right, let's dive into a question that I think is on every educator's mind. How do we design learning experiences that actually connect with our students' real lives? Our guide for this is a recent Substack from Dr. Simon Paul Atkinson on the fourth principle of learning design. He makes a really compelling case for designing for the learner's context. So let's get into it. I mean, just think about your students for a second. Learning isn't just happening in the lecture hall or on the LMS, right? It's happening in their dorm rooms, on the bus, during their part-time jobs, everywhere. And here's the real problem. The challenge that Dr. Atkinson points out is that so much of our course design just pretends this reality doesn't exist. We default to this model that assumes the classroom is the only place that really matters. So what's the big idea here? Well, it's really a call to action. We need to intentionally, consciously break out of that classroom first or LMS first box and start designing for the complex, messy, varied contexts that our learners are actually living in. And look, this isn't just some new, trendy idea. Dr. Atkinson makes it really clear that this is grounded in some pretty solid theory, specifically situated learning. I mean, we've known for decades, thanks to pioneers like Love and Wenger, that learning is so much more effective when it happens in the same kind of environment where it's actually going to be used. And this really gets to the core of why context is just so crucial. It all comes down to motivation. A student's immediate environment, whether they're feeling supported or stressed out or distracted, it has a direct impact on their drive to learn. And the latest research backs this up. If we ignore this situational motivation, we're basically ignoring a massive piece of the student success puzzle. So the big question is, how do we actually do this? Well, Dr. Atkinson gives us 3 sub-principles to work with. And the first one, it really challenges something we've come to take for granted in pedagogy. It's the idea that we should prioritize the learner's context over the cohort, especially when we're talking about online courses. Now, here's a really crucial distinction he makes. So often, we kind of lump situated and social together, but they are not the same thing. Social constructivism is all about the who, the group interactions, the shared meaning-making. But situated learning is about the where and the how. It's about that authentic, real-world application. They're related, for sure, but they're not interchangeable. And he does not pull any punches here. He calls the relentless push for collaboration a fetishization and says it can do real harm. And if you think about it from a student's perspective, it makes sense. How many times is group work assigned just because, without a clear link to an outcome? For a lot of students, that's not helping them learn. It's just another hurdle to jump over. So the big takeaway here is pretty simple, right? Collaboration has to have a point. It needs a purpose. And research by folks like Kirshner has shown that if you have some mandatory group activity that isn't directly tied to a real assessed outcome, it can actually be counterproductive. The goal has to be authentic application, not just, interaction for the sake of it. Okay, so that naturally leads us into the second sub-principle. It builds right on this idea of individual context, and it's all about designing for learning on demand. This means we structure things so that students can pull the information they need exactly when and where it's most relevant for them. But right away, this throws up a massive challenge, doesn't it? How can we design for on-demand learning if our students don't even know what they need to know in the first place? It's that classic metacognition problem. Dr. Atkinson's solution is a really smart concept he calls scaffolded autonomy. So, step 1 is just acknowledging the reality of the Dunning-Kruger effect, that our students often can't see the gaps in their own knowledge. So, to counter that, we, as designers, create really clear taxonomies, maps of the subject area, and then we use that structure to build optional navigable pathways. So, in other words, we give them a map, but we let them choose the route. And what's cool about this on-demand approach is that it forces us to rethink what we even mean by a learning community. Instead of just the other students in the class, why not encourage them to tap into the networks they already have? Their colleagues at work, their friends, their family. That brings this incredible wealth of diverse, real-world perspectives right into the learning process. And that idea of choice, of individual paths, it's a perfect lead-in to his third and final sub-principle, designing for flexible pathways. This is all about getting away from that single, straight, linear road through a course that we're all so familiar with. Now, the great thing here is we are not starting from scratch. We actually have a fantastic blueprint for this already, the Universal Design for Learning framework. It really pushes us to provide multiple ways for students to engage with our material, multiple ways for them to get the information, and this is so important, multiple ways for them to show us what they've learned.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, the learning outcome, the destination, that's still set. It's not a free-for-all. That part is non-negotiable. But our job as designers then becomes to acknowledge and even actively encourage the many different paths a student might take to get there.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What does a course actually look like when you design for context over cohort, for learning that's on demand, and for pathways that are genuinely flexible?
When you boil it all down, what Dr. Atkinson is really calling for here is a fundamental shift in our mindset. It's about moving away from that rigid, course-centric model, the classic content dump, and moving towards something that is way more flexible, way more responsive, and is truly centered on the individual learner. So I want to leave you with a challenge, something to take away and really think about. Take a look at a course you're involved with, just one. Can you find a single learning outcome and just brainstorm how you might redesign it to open up multiple context-aware pathways for your students? Because as Dr. Atkinson's work suggests, even a small shift in this direction can make a world of difference.